Hi everyone, my name's Declan McGlynn. Welcome to Friday Forum Live, Point Blank's weekly broadcast, bringing you exclusive tutorials, artist interviews and industry insight every Friday live from East London. Today we are joined by Point Blank Creative Director JC Concato to look at 10 mixing mistakes everybody makes. So today we are joined by JC to investigate 10 common mistakes producers make. But if you want to learn more about mixing and production, make sure you check out our courses at pointblanklondon.com. And remember, we are live, so get your questions in the comments and we'll get to them throughout the broadcast. We've already had loads of people chatting in there, so keep it up and we'll get to it at the end. JC, welcome.
Thank you.
Back in the Friday Forum.
Back in the Friday.
How are you doing?
Very good, and you?
Excellent, excellent.
Excellent.
So today's about mistakes, and in a way there's not really, guys have been chatting about this already, but there's no real mistakes in mixing.
No, not
in terms
really,
of creative mistakes.
Yeah,
Today's more about the fundamental issues that we...
Issues that sometimes may happen because of your room or just common mistakes that I've found that I've made a lot, and then I've heard people make a lot as well.
Yeah, and we see you in our students.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's more those kind of basic mistakes, and think of it, bear that in mind when you're mixing.
Yeah, exactly. So shall we get straight into it?
Yeah, we've made what we felt was our top 10 that we've, and the first one is probably the one that I've heard the most is too much bass, too much sub bass. And usually that's caused by just having speakers that can't generate that bass. You're not in a club, you've got small speakers, 6-inch, 5-inch, even maybe 8-inch speakers. And people tend to want to hear that sub a lot. And with those speakers, you've got to bear in mind that you're only going to feel it. If you hear it, you're probably getting too much. Right. And I think all of us have been guilty of having just too much bass in our mixes because we lack bass. Yeah.
Yes, we do.
But so again, it goes back to checking on different monitors and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. So typically here would be an example of it's a kind of a trance track is in one of our courses, have a listen. So it's warm and bottom end it's quite big, but with that type of track there's a fundamentally something quite wrong with it, which is too much bass on the kick and bass clash between, and the kick is not really coming through, it's a bit woolly, and on a big system that would be just too much. So let's have a look here at the kick. And you listen to the kick on its own, you feel, it's probably okay on those speakers, but on bigger speakers there's lots going on. And obviously if you don't have the speakers, you can use the analyzer. Yeah, the spectrum analyzer, it's going to be your friend, when you mix on smaller speakers and you can't hear the stuff. You need to have something to tell you. And here, there was a massive boost. Again, and I've seen people doing that kind of stuff. I've done it on purpose here. I've seen people doing that just because they felt, I'm not hearing it, so I'm going to add it. And it's kind of like, well, maybe you shouldn't hear it in the first place anyway, because you don't have the right speakers to hear it. So as soon as we take that off, big difference, and on its own you may think, well, it's just not as nice.
So this thing is like, it does sound nicer.
It sounds nicer, and that's what I wanted to kind of, I think that's the aim of today. Yeah. It's important to consider that you feel it swung nicer, but then there's something not quite working. So if I take it off, I don't really need to cut off the 30. I could a little bit, but I can't. And now let's have a listen to it now. It's already much better.
The kick is coming through a lot better. Yeah.
Kick's coming out through a lot better. The bass, you can get away with that. I probably would put a little bit of a cut here as well. And straight away.
It's more rhythmic as well.
It's more rhythmic, it bounces better. Yeah. You hear the elements, you don't have this thing masking, this low sub-mid, sub and low-mid masking what's above. So that is the first one that I think is an important one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in the same kind of idea, I'm hearing a lot of stuff with too much high.
Right.
Maybe it's because digital, maybe it's me not being a huge fan of, I like the analog kind of roll off at the top end. I think it's more musical. Yeah. And the louder you're going to play it, it's going to be mastered loud, it's going to be played in clubs with maybe sometimes sound system are not as good as they should. And if you have a lot of things going on, it's going to be really tiring for the ears. So if we listen to that. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the top end here. And let's have a look at some of the elements in here. You see, for example, we've got this element. This one is not too bad, but so this element is okay. But if we listen to some of the others, like this one, you see here, for example, look at that, what's going on in the top end.
Yeah.
And again, you may not have, those ultrasonic frequencies above 20 and stuff. You may not hear them, but they're there. And they're going to start accumulating between each other. So what I would do here, I'm not even sure we need that. Look, without the EQ, without the boost, it's still there. So here I would definitely have a cut. And straight away you're seeing the line here.
Yeah.
It's not doing a big difference to your sound. You're still getting the same sensation, except that it's a lot more controlled. And if you have lots of elements with that kind of, let's, because you see here, if we listen to that again, here again. So all of those are going to accumulate in your mix.
Yeah.
And you may not perceive it, but as soon as you're starting getting that over 3-4 track, you're going to have a bit of a problem, really. So let's tidy up a little bit that and see what happens. This one is all right. Yeah, it's already a lot cleaner at the top end.
Yeah, it's less brittle.
Let's Bristol. The hat as well come through better because there was no space for the hat. And that's something I think we did on FFL on mastering, the DIY one, the kind of home mastering. And that was one of the main things I've noticed on the mix. The mix was really, really good, but there was so much stuff fighting for the top end. So it's about leaving that kind of space and think of it for the, everybody is obsessed with kick and bass, but it's the same issue is in the top, in the mid. It's about leaving that kind of space for. This is typically a track that has so much going on in the top end. You need to leave some space for other things to come through. It's all about masking, isn't it? Really? So that's another thing. Another one would be, so that was the kind of the super high one. Also, lots of wide element. So if we look at, I think I've got something, here. I mean, this track is not too busy, but I find it happens a lot with synth and when you use plugins that are, especially in Logic, they all have, there's no two mono panning. I've always felt that's something I go on about, I think, in every FFL. I want to channel and two pan so you can control, because otherwise everything is super wide. And then we tend nowadays, we love mixings to be even wider, so we tend to put wider tools to emphasize the problem, to emphasize the wideness of it. Yeah. And with that comes another problem, is that everything is wide and you're losing the focus on some of the elements. If everything is wide, for things to sound super wide, you need things to be not as wide, so that the things that are wide are sounding wide, Yeah. So here's an a very simple example. And the track is really minimalistic, so you can afford to have super wide, super wide stuff. But for example, the clap here, it's super wide, it's really super stereo. And that clashes a little bit, it makes the picture a little bit. So again, the producer on this one, I've seen a lot of people putting those sample delay. They work really great in widening stuff, but they create a lot of phase issue as well. And there's a bit of a phase on the clap because of that. So as soon as you turn it down, well, actually turn it off altogether. It's not as wide, but somehow it's more focused. And then the synths are doing their job. Yeah. If you have this clap super wide, and this is a first example, but a lot of example would be if you have a lot of synth, especially like in trance or EDM and stuff like that, you've got a lot of stuff playing. If they hold super wide, then you're going to have a huge problem.
Yeah,
because nothing is focused.
Synth presets come packaged very wide.
Yeah, exactly.
To make them sound really impressive.
Exactly.
You got to watch out for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, if we take an example of not this track maybe, but we could go back to another track. This one, for example. This one's got a lot of... It's got a lot of synth going on. This one is sick. That's the trance. So the pad is probably here, this pad here is probably okay wide. And that you're going to want super wide because that's your main thing. So if anything, if you're going to widen up that should be that. And then you know, this is wide with the delay, but what you could do too, we could bring that down here and keep the delay, but actually we're going to make the sound itself a little bit, so where is the imaging? Direction mixer, I think we can do it with that. Yeah, so in the direction mixer you could use the spread and narrow it, which would be the equivalent for you of 2 pans, and narrow them with 2 pans, you know. And so it's a bit more narrow. The delay is doing the job. And that for me straight away works also better, because there's more space on the, what we hear on the side comes across better.
Yeah.
If too much stuff comes again, you know, it's about this balance, isn't it, with frequency. Too much stuff on the same frequency, fight. Too much stuff on the side, fight. Too much stuff in the middle, fight. So it's mixing is always about that kind of balance, isn't it? So that's another example here. So that's that. Also avoid one big thing, and I've been guilty of that most of my life, and I still do it. Avoid EQing too much in solo.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, another example. For example, let's take this. Which one should we take? Maybe this one.
Well, we heard it with a kick.
You heard it with the kick, exactly. That was the example.
Yeah.
So, but do we have to? How many basses do we have here? Yeah. So you know, you listen to that on its own. And it would be easy to start, yeah, it sounds nice with the bass on there. But you've got the sub, you've got the kick. Do you want that to be that subby?
You know, it's less exciting with that, but it makes sense.
But on its own, it's
in
not
context,
as good.
Yeah.
But it comes across better in the mix. Before that, I wasn't getting the low arpeggio, because it was just too low. It was masked with everything, and it made the bottom end muddy. You know, so it's really that mistake of EQing in solo.
Yeah.
You need to EQ it. I mean, sometimes you need to. The way I go about it is I EQ in solo to do corrective EQ, like on the vocal if there's a lot of pops, or if there's something majorly wrong, like a noise that really gets in the way. So you can identify that, and then I do the fine tuning with the rest of the tracks in the mix. So you do it in the context. So that would be that. And the same way goes with too much boosting. You know, you keep on boosting all the time, and again, that is an example here. It would be easy to boost too much everything, and everything becomes a bit aggressive. I mean, this one works great, but if we start pushing, you know, a lot of those frequencies in the top end, I mean, typically on an acoustic guitar for me is the example, and I don't think I have a really good example for that right now. Yeah, actually we can listen to that project. Here are vocals, and let's solo one of the vocal tracks. So let's go on the verse here, and I'm going to solo that track. For me, the vocal here was lacking brightness, openness, okay? And very easily, people, instead of doing that kind of stuff, would probably, a beginner mistake would be to do that kind of, I mean, I'm doing it really gross, you know?
Yeah.
So you're doing that instead.
Because you think brighter, make it louder, higher frequency.
You know, and make it brighter. And it's great, it works, but first of all, the resonance that are in the lower end, which are causing the muddiness. The muddiness is caused by not the lack of top end, but actually too much resonance in the lower mid. So if you do that on every track and you don't fix the problem in the lower mid, not only it doesn't go away, but you're adding boosting all the time everywhere across several channels. Again, getting quite aggressive, quite brittle.
Yeah.
Sound don't gel as much in the mix as well. So yeah, that would be my advice, is again, cut. Also, EQ tend to sound more natural when you cut than when you boost, especially analog gear kind of brings nice harmonics when you boost. You know, nice EQ, expensive EQ are always going to give you that kind of rich harmonics, and that's what I think people love in analog equipment. But with plug-in, I find the more you boost, it's just not as natural as a sound. Again, more tiring, so more pleasing mix. So instead of that,
there is no hard and fast rule for when to cut and when to
no,
boost.
just go with what's the problem. Have you listened to this sound? Okay, it's lacking top end, but what is lacking the top end is those frequencies here. Because they were masking over there. So as soon as I've done that now, it's rebalanced. Yeah. So the rule is to listen, try to identify, you listen to a sound, okay, it's dull, but why is it dull? Is it because just what needs to be there is not there? Or if there's too much of something else that is masking what should be there, what I need to hear? And again, it's going to be more musical, more. Yeah. Again, also another tip that we wanted to discuss is clipping.
Yes.
Yeah, clipping. So have a listen to again. As we know, if you don't know, it's okay to clip an internal channel, a single channel in Logic because of the floating bit depth, the floating resolution within. So you've got, I mean, you've got a really big margin of dBs. I don't know how exactly I should calculate, but that's not the point.
It's over 100.
Over 100 dBs, definitely headroom on a single channel. However, you cannot clip the master fader. That is a no-go. That's going to distort inevitably. So you see here, you're clipping a little bit. That is even too much. You know, you may think, oh, okay, can I get away with, you know, half a dB or clipping? Or you just can't, you know. So gain is going to be your friend here on the master channel. On the note of internal clipping as well on individual channel, although it's not a problem, when it comes to using compression and stuff like that, I'm quite conservative with my gain staging throughout the mixing. Just because if a signal is really super loud on your channel, the compressor is going to react in a very different way.
Yeah.
So you could end up where the signal is so loud that even at the highest possible threshold, the compressor still kicks in. I've seen that, especially with the SSL, for example, the Wave SSL, which react like a real analog. So they're calibrated for analog levels. And when you go into the digital domain, even with the threshold at its maximum, it's still picking up. And you're like, well, no, if I want less, you know, so I go a bit more conservative and get less on every single channel. But that's me. But the last channel is very, very important.
Yeah.
Another one that we wanted to touch on was automation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with producers. One producer I worked with, I can't say.
Name and shame.
I had this idea that, you know, the more you compress, the less automation you have to do. And especially with vocal.
Vocals,
so it kind of, no, compress it more so you don't do automation. And it's kind of like, well, no, it's very two different things. Compression, you're trying to control some dynamics or some peaks or whatever, or bring back low levels. But automation is making sure things are consistent in the track. Or, actually, it's not always consistency. Sometimes it's about bringing life and dynamic, especially in electronic music, I find, where everything could be really consistent and a bit boring. But especially in the pop world as well, I mean, it's not uncommon to do a lift on the chorus, even if it's a dB, and on the last chorus maybe a bit more, so that it feels that the song is building up. You know, you never get tired and bored. So all those kind of elements are very important. I mean, have a look here, for example, just simple example here on this Moog solo. Well, it's not really a solo, but it's... and on the guitars as well. I mean, if you look at those, you know, there's a lot of automation. Look at what's going on here. And there's almost a contrasting thing. You see, you've got the bass amp going down here during the synth, the guitar going up. The synth here is being followed for dynamic. So it feels a bit more alive, you know.
I guess that concept of riding the fader is kind of disappearing as you put it on the mouse more and more.
Yeah.
They don't like ride as they go.
You don't ride it, and normally, you know, when you used to mix on a desk, you know, it's very much feeling it as well. Like you were saying, you're riding. You know, it's called riding the fader. And to be honest, people don't. Maybe sometimes I don't think people realize that on commercial mixes, from my experience, you spend more time doing automation than anything else. You know, you get your drums right. Then you sit everything else, and then it's about volumes, because that's going to make the difference. Yeah. You know, don't attempt to control everything with limiter, with necessarily. But again, depends on the music you mix, obviously. So automation is probably the biggest part. You know? Yeah. And again, you know, it's another thing that we've talked so many times, I guess. Mastering and mixing. When do you master? You know, a lot of people master when they mix. I'm personally, mixing is not mastering as far as I'm concerned. I reference a mix, which is mastered, but that means you've got a high standard, it's there. I make it quieter in my project. I bring it, you know, usually 6, 7 dBs down, which is what we push nowadays, you know, sometimes a bit more. You bring that down, so you get a same level to play with. And then you should aim to get your mix as close as possible as if it was finished. You know, my biggest pride was when occasionally and very rarely you turn up at a mastering session and the guy is just kind of like, well, no, it's there. Yeah. And you're like, yes. You know, it has happened maybe twice to me.
That's still pretty good, though.
Yeah, you know, it's you know, so you should really aim for that. You know, it doesn't mean that I don't test loudness. I put a limiter, of course, especially if I work with a client where a lot of bands are kind of like, yeah, but it's quieter. So you put the version with a limiter for them too. To have a better idea when they play to mates and in the cars or against other records, so your mix stands up, you know. Otherwise, a lot of people are going to say, well, your mix is a bit crap because it doesn't stand up to a commercial one. It's kind of like, well, it's not mastered, you know. So, but you should aim for that instead of master it, because then you know you've got this 10% after that where you can still improve your mix at the mastering. Whereas if you master at the same time, you've already reached its potential. I mean, you're still going to be able to fix stuff at the mastering, but we're talking fixing. I'm always aim for high standard. So that would be, so you know, here sounds fine, but then if you want to try testing a bit of mastering, we've got it here, and it's clipping. So obviously we don't want that, do we? So yeah.
So is there a hard and fast rule in terms of putting a limiter, mix it into a limiter, mix it into a compressor?
A lot of different people work. I mean, I've seen people working with a compressor on the bus and they mix into it straight away. And I completely understand why you would do that, since if you're planning to have one at the end, you may as well. Because, you know, if you go too far in your mix and everything sounds great, then you start putting a compressor on the whole mix and it's changing it. And you're back at changing levels again and stuff like that. So I personally tend to bring my compressor, the way I mix, and it's only me, well, not only me, but I've seen people do it, it's up to you. There's no rule. I personally do my drums, tend to bring the musical element bass and another musical element, and then if I've got vocal, I bring vocal. Yeah. Then I put my compressor on the bus, and then I start bringing things around and start tweaking back maybe the drums a little bit and things like that. But, so I bring it halfway through, I guess. But I've seen people doing it even after they've done 3 hours of automation on vocals, and you're like, it's going to really affect the dynamic. So I would do the automation after having the compressor on the bus, you know. So, and finally, I believe our last one is basically how you mix, you know. I don't know about you, but I've made that mistakes, especially with the AW now. Never done it rarely with tapes and stuff like that, because obviously the facilities were not there. But with the AW, it's easy to mix for hours. You never take a break. You know, with a tape, what I really loved about is that you get to the far end of the song, rewind. If you've got a 48 tracks to 24 tracks syncing, you've got 2-3 minutes break, you know, by the time you've rewind and they're syncing back again to press play again, you know. They're nice, those little moments of breaks. It's, you know, it's a muscle, your hair is a muscle. So here I've seen people, and I've done it, you know, where you mix, you're really immersed in a part, like the middle, the drop or whatever, or the big part of the track, and you've got it in loop and it's constant, and then it's kind of like, after a while, even yourself, you realize, oh, I'm not sure where I am anymore. Feel a bit dizzy, feel a bit weird, you know. Yeah. That loop system is really a no-go, you know. And I've been guilty of that, but it doesn't give you a perspective of the song. It changes the way you listen to things, and then, yeah, it's not a good thing. So take break. Don't mix too loud, unless you've got a room that allows you to do that. But even then, you shouldn't. You know, it should sound exciting at a normal level. I would say conversation level you mix. Yeah. That's when you can tell really in terms of levels, balance between instruments. Take break and also monitor, step out of the room, you will hear so much better. Leave the door open, I do that all the time. When I come towards the end of, I'm nearly there, I leave the door open of the studio, I go in another room next door and then you listen to it. And levels really suddenly you're all noticing what's a bit wrong.
Yeah.
Ideally, because you work at home, so you've got this luxury, you know. Finish your mix and listen to it with fresh air in the next day. And straight away, again, mistakes will pop straight away. So those kind of
yeah, I mean, there's loads been going in the chat room, guys, so just keep it coming, but yeah.
Okay, brilliant, and obviously we'll go back in it and answer back, and if you want to go unplugged in as well, we can.
Yeah, we got some questions here.
Yeah.
Someone asked, is it okay to lower the master channel instead of lowering each single instrument to create the needed headroom before exporting the mix?
Yeah, I mean, I would do it with a gain. You could. I personally would do it with a gain because if you have a compressor, or even an EQ on especially a compressor on the master channel, and it's really pumping loud again, it's for the same reason I was saying before. So before I hit my master, have a look what I've done here. For example, on this screen is I've got a gain. The first thing I have on my master channel is a gain. Therefore, I bring down everything to a normal level. Then I can have my compressor. I can have my limiter. Yeah. They respond better. Because I'm used to certain settings. You know, we all know that suddenly you're getting on minus 10 dB. That should, if your levels gain staging, you're getting used to that kind of. So that's me, yeah. Cool. So do it on a gain rather than the actual fader, I would suggest. Okay,
cool. Flavio Yameri is asking, I'm combining 5 synths with each other and it's really dirty. Oh, nice.
Yeah, great.
With some disturbing frequencies. I'm trying to make it cleaner, but I think I'm taking too much off. Any suggestions in terms of cleaning something up without removing the actual vibe and sound?
Just take less, you know. I mean, are you getting radical? It's really hard to tell. I mean, it's the kind of project I think we should do in FFL where maybe some people have some issues and they could send them to us and we could maybe feedback.
Yeah.
You know, for example, typical example here, we get the 5 track, we could listen to the 5, how they mix and maybe hopefully make some useful suggestions, I think.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, take a little bit less, you know, and again, in the context, is it okay? Is it too much? Yeah, you're probably, if you feel you take a bit less, a bit too much, that means you're taking a bit too much, so do it less.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we are out of time, unfortunately. But hopefully you got plenty of inspiration for the weekend. But if you're thirsty for more, make sure you check out our mixing courses at pointblanklondon.com. And we'll be back next week with another FFL, so we'll see you then. Cheers.